Hello, my friends. Welcome to Circle of Wisdom. My name is Christopher Witecki. I call myself the Sensei to Serious Joy, and this is my weekly digital fireside chat, if you will, with my co-Christopher companion here, Christopher OneFeather. Hello, Master OneFeather. How are you this week?
I am doing quite well. Just, those of us in the Midwest, like Mary here, are getting braced for the onslaught of winter now. I think we're supposed to get snow flurries tomorrow, so that should be exciting.
Yeah, the winter is coming. Do you guys feel the sharp change in winter?
Uh, well, yeah, in the Midwest here, especially around the Great Lakes, we definitely get bombarded.
And I don't uh, ever look forward to seeing the first snowfall, but after 60 years, I've been used to it and know that that's what's going to come. But it seems like the weather's been changing the last 10 years or so, so it seems like we're warmer longer than we used to be.
Yeah, it definitely is much more of a uh, challenge, I think, getting through winter. But at the same time, I think that if you go back 100 years ago, in the 1890s, turn of the century, they were still getting snowfalls in July. So,
Really?
oh yeah, yeah, it was not uncommon, especially in New England.
Wow.
So yeah, all these people who are running around screaming, we're doomed," really haven't done the research that's necessary because, uh, you know, it's just cycles. They're just multiple cycles, and we're still emerging from the last ice age, and a lot of people are not factoring that in. We're
Well,
still
since you brought
floating
up
in.
global warming, you're right. We don't know if it's warming or not, but here's what we do know. We know that no other species dumped 100 tons of carbon crap in the atmosphere. We did do that.
Yeah, but at the same time,
We ought to
Mother
clean it up.
Nature. But at the same time, Mother Nature does things of that sort all the time
Sure,
when
sure.
when a volcano goes off.
Totally. And I think that the global warming conversation has been segueing in the wrong direction. Who knows what Mother Earth wants? It's not polite to pollute. We
Well,
shouldn't
yeah,
put
I mean,
carbon, we shouldn't put carbons in the air. Let's quit, period. I don't care if it's warming the earth or not. It's not nice.
well, I think that we definitely have to be mindful, but that's just being real about life. I mean, if you just go through and create a disaster wherever you go, then you're certainly not practicing any kind of enlightened approach to living.
No, you're not. And that's actually a good segue to kind of where we are. We've come to that final line because we have a full moon in Taurus here in the next 24 hours. It's going to start to go full tonight. The sun is in Scorpio, which is the absolute line on the other side. So Taurus is manifestation and Scorpio is death. So this full moon is technically, you could say, the new year. This is kind of New Year's Eve for astrology, really, energetically.
Yeah, it's definitely that first passage into regeneration, dormancy, because the next stage now is for this dormant cycle to unfold, and then we have gestation, then we have that reemergence of activity from seeds, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah,
It
we
is.
are on the threshold of the great plunge.
This is pretty much the line, though. I mean, and as far as astrology is concerned, this is the line between 0 and 1. This is it here. Taurus is already, we've been growing for 6 months. 0 is the absolute. So, and I think for people, this is interesting. Last night in the United States national elections, I don't know if you paid attention to them or not, but looks like the United States, energy flipped, and a huge conservative wave went over and took over Congress now, which is interesting. To me, this is interesting to see the polls flip, literally. And I think that in this full moon, a lot of people, that I've been talking about in my show this week, has been coming to some sort of bottom line with yourself emotionally. And I've been talking about this for a few weeks, but I really think this full moon is the absolute bottom line to something in someone's life, and not in a horrible way, but people always say, this is my final, this is it, I mean it this time, and you're like, sure. Well, astrologically, I think if people say they mean it this time, it will stick like glue.
Well, from my observation, I have a few extra years on you.
Yes, sir.
And
doesn't stick like glue ever.
Well, from what I have observed, is it's the swinging of the pendulum, and it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And if you'll notice, it is extremely rare for a candidate to win by more than 4 points.
Yeah.
The presidential as well as the congressional races. So that shows you how equally divided, the entire universe we inhabit is. Because it's that minute swing back and forth between positive and negative that creates all of the fluctuations that we experience. So as far as this, swing to the conservative side, I think that it's been building for a while. Mm-hmm. And I think that when we arrive at a point where life is really starting to become very tolerable, I think that a lot of people flip out with that. Mm-hmm. I think that then they want to start making changes, and so then we plunge into the Bush era all over again, and we become antagonistic. We start wars. We basically stir the pot up, and then when it becomes intolerable enough, we'll finally, in a state of angst, go back and be a little more focused in how we're doing our voting obligations and start thinking in terms of us instead of me. And I think that's the distinction between the conservatives and the liberals, is that the conservatives are all about me. It's it's that flexing the ego at its highest level. And the liberals tend to be more community minded, and they think more about us, and they want to take care of everybody in the crowd. Whereas the conservatives, it's all about, I want mine, and to hell with the rest of you. So it's an interesting mindset, but it is nonetheless the dominant theme on planet Earth.
It goes back and forth. I agree. I look at it as a bobsled. For me, I'm gone caring about so much where the rat race is now. But I am excited. I don't, because really, to me, they're all the same monster anyways. They're all kind of serving corporate greed, and we're going to hit our heads in a lot of painful little things before we start to grow up. But what I'm excited about is that to see the things change, to see the light change, I don't care what color it changed to. I'm just glad it changed. So,
yeah. I think that it just reaffirms the fact that we're moving further and further along on a timeline, and the timeline ultimately will collapse when we, arrive at a point where enough people have had it and want to step out of the whole process of time. And I think we're getting closer to that. It may be millisteps, but micro steps, but it nonetheless is, it is getting ready to unfold.
Well, I think this is although this seems kind of quiet, I argue this is I know I haven't been on the planet as long as you have, but I think that as far as our lifetime is concerned, this little moment here is going to be not so much in politics. I'm just saying politics is showing what I'm saying. I'm not saying that this is due to politics, but I just think that people are very quietly making little positive, negative shifts inside of themselves, and whatever these are going to stick for a long time. And I think that's what this full moon is about. This has to do, of course, with Saturn and Scorpio, is what I'm referring to. I think that we're making some decisions that we're going to try out for some time now, which in some ways is relaxing.
It can be, yeah. It's cathartic in the sense that when we do make change, we have to be willing to accept the consequence. And I think a lot of people make changes without anticipating consequences. And that's where we end up, getting snafu'd with all of this stuff.
Mm.
Well, this afternoon, I was driving back to the house, and I was listening to the poll results, and I was listening how the president was calling all the people that won and congratulated them, and they were commenting on how the conservative party was uh, not necessarily getting up and clapping their hands as much as they were realizing that, okay, we've got the Democrats and the Republicans, and maybe it doesn't need to be that much that anymore as far as strict guidelines on we're not going to get anything passed because the Republicans don't want it. It's more so now it's kind of like the president is saying, okay, I am going to have to go a little bit this way if I want to get something done. And the Republicans are saying, well, maybe we are going to have to listen a little bit more, I'm hoping, this next 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's we'll see. I think it works for. I think when someone makes a move, everyone's at a stalemate, and everyone has been at a stalemate for a long time. But remember, I mean, let's just talk politics as it reflects where all of humankind is. I think all of humankind is at a bit of a stalemate. The old things are not working anymore, and with the Sun in Scorpio and Saturn in Scorpio, part of this is about we allow ourselves to fall into emotional ruts, and these ruts, this last rut has been this stalemate rut. So by someone making a change anywhere, the whole waterbed starts changing, and that to me is exciting. And I think for Obama, like you're saying, it's like to have any kind of opposition only gives you strength because you can kind of bounce off of it and whatnot. But I think all of us are going to be trying to kind of get off of some deep waterbed that we've allowed ourselves to kind of emotionally fall into, and pull ourselves out of it. And the people who got out in the cold weather and voted, the conservatives went out and voted, kudos to them for getting off their butt and changing the rut. I, for one, am grateful. But I think it doesn't really matter because I'm looking at this in a long term. I think it would be nice if people got along and started to work together in the government, but it is always shaping and shifting. But I get this energetic psychic feel that everyone after this election has jumped right ahead to the next presidential race in their heads, and it feels like everyone's kind of already there. But but Mr. OneFeather, tell me, sir, what are you talking about this week on your show, Visions, Dreams, and Insights? What are your observations of the universe in Scorpio right now, sir?
Well, I think that the big thing, the big event, of course, is the full moon coming up tomorrow. But what I keep going back and looking at with some anticipation is if you really look at the way the planets are lining up for this event, we have a real nice combination of that Sun in Scorpio in sextile to Pluto and Mars in Capricorn. And Venus is in Scorpio, so we've got those elements. There's a sextile going on in that direction, and then that is filling out with a sextile to Chiron over in Pisces. So from what I'm observing, I think that this is an ideal time to take the energy and make it a very personal passage, and to do some deep inner work and really get rid of some of the scars that you've been carrying around forever. So I see this as being a weekend, or an event, not a weekend, but an event, where in any way that you can, go into a retreat mode, go into a personal mode, and observe this full moon, on your back porch, or hold up in your apartment or your house, and try to disengage from the fray, because I think there's a lot of inner journeying that can be done with this passage of the Sun and the Moon and the various affecting planets.
I agree. I think ultimately there's a really deep subconscious funk that people have been carrying on their shoulders for 30 years. I really think everyone's been carrying some sort of a funk. And it doesn't matter what caused it. It's not about the blame. It's that we get caught in these deep emotional patterns. And when you describe going inward, I think that's precisely what it is. It's kind of like trying to find really where we're resisting. Where is it that we're resisting? And it doesn't matter what we're resisting or why. Just let go.
Right, exactly.
Just let go, because you can get caught up in the what's or whys forever. It doesn't matter. God will flush it out if you let the full moon and everything take it. And if you observe, you'll understand as it goes by. I'm finding in my own self, in my own inner work, that it's just, you get to some degree habit, to some degree old fights that I've lost and I just have to accept, and so then I can let the energy go. But ultimately, this is with Saturn moving into Sag, and this is possibly, folks, the dawn of a total new day in your life for yourself personally. Who knows what will happen in the politics? And what that means is like if you do that inward journey that Master OneFeather is talking about, and really come to peace and just say fuck it, I'm going to let it go. I think this full moon is here to wash it away.
Yeah, I think it definitely has the potential for doing that. And again, it's always the individual. I mean, if you are actually proactive and putting effort into, utilizing these transformative energies, then this can be a huge period of insight and creativity, and I mean, there's just a lot of possibilities that are lining up right now currently in the universe that we're surrounded by.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's like with Jupiter in Leo, here's how I see the cycles. In essence, we're going to cut off the fat now. Then Jupiter retrogrades at 22 degrees in a couple of weeks or so, which means we all sit back for the winter and we dream. In the Jupiter retrograde. And then when Jupiter goes direct in Leo, these new boundaries will have set. We're all used to the new Congress, or all used to the new lines that we cut right now. And come spring, it's going to probably feel everyone's going to be ready to try something new and to go forward with something new. That's what I think.
That hopefully is the way it's going to play out. I think that, again, the possibilities are definitely lining up for us. And, I think the edgy part, if we look at that combination of Mars and Pluto putting some kind of a process in place right now, I think that's the only thing that we really need to put our vision on, because that's where the next stage of this unfolding is coming from.
I agree. Oh, yeah, I totally agree. Mars on Pluto. Pluto's at 11 degrees right now, which tells me that integrity is what rules. 11 is an integrity, number of integrity. So Mars is saying, hey, these systems you talk about, it's time to put systems of integrity in place and let the systems of integrity determine the integrity at each turn and bend.
Yeah, it definitely has the shadow of that imagery around it, absolutely.
I think so. And Neptune and Chiron and Pisces, a lot of self-forgiveness, both retrograde. So really, to some degree, I say this, but I know from my fact that even the crap I was stuck in the 80s in my childhood was due to the crap I was stuck in the 1880s. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I think we're, for the first time starting to, when we let go of whatever our emotional angst are or whatever and kind of let it go, we may be for the first time letting go our ancient karma too. I really think the species is waking up for the first time. A lot of my clients in personal readings are coming to a real ease with who they are, finally. Usually instigated by some sort of, quote, crisis. But on the other side of it isn't more crisis. On the other side of it seems to be people coming to an ease with themselves, finally.
I agree with that.
Is that what you're finding?
Mm-hmm. I find that, like, the last 30 years have been so full of why and where and why does this happen to me, and that all of a sudden I'm feeling that I don't have to worry about the whys and the wheres and whatevers. I just need to worry about how I'm handling it and how peaceful I am, and that I don't want to go there anymore. I just want to sit back and enjoy the rest of my life.
Yeah. Don't want to feel this way. Don't want to feel that way. That's
Yeah.
really that's it. Go ahead, next one.
Yeah, that's the whole challenge. You know, I have some friends who are life coaches, and one of them, pardon me, I've been watching this build for the last 5 years, and pretty much had this scenario clearly illuminated in my mind's eye. But he's the core of his practice with his clients is, you know, getting people to the point where they are. Wow, there must be dust in the air.
Oh yeah, I've had those throat tickles before on the air.
Yes, it's very uncomfortable. But anyway, he gets his clients to this point where he whips them into a frenzy, kind of like Anthony Robbins, about I'm going to pursue those things that I feel a deep and sustained passion for. And one of the things that a lot of these people who are on that tack don't recognize is that passion is a fleeting process. Passion is, if you can imagine a hillside covered with dry grass, passion is like a fire. It goes across that grass field almost, you know, instantaneously. It consumes everything in its past, and that's what, you know, the whole high and low cycles emotionally that we experience are generated from. They're transient. So if you're trying to make all of your life changes around setting yourself up so that you're always engaged passionately in life, I think that you're going to hit a brick wall. You know, and there's one particular person that I've watched them definitely run into a huge brick wall, and you know, it appears that there's going to be changes being made as far as relationship and family and everything else. So I think we have to get to the point where we can step out of all of our passions and all of our dreams and desires, and really become the observer and enjoy the journey, enjoy the carnival that we're participating in. But when we get attached to something deeply and passionately, I think that ends up becoming a sustained journey. You're going to torture yourself with that for quite a while.
I think you're totally right. I think that's an emotional maturity you're describing, sir.
Yes. Well, I think it's also maturity.
Well, I think so. We all want passion all the time. The baby wants nothing but candy, but it'll make it sick. You know,
right.
Like,
and it's a maturation, but I think it's also on the very fundamental level. I think it's recognition of the fact that we are the entire process that's going on. So we're beginning to disassociate from that smaller self, the ego, that's always in fight or flight, like we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
And taking the next step of the journey into, you know, recognizing that we are invulnerable, and these passions are generally generated by feeling somewhere buried within us of vulnerability and fear.
Yes. Yes, I'm reading a book, Conversations with God. Have you ever read that book, sir?
Many years ago, yeah. I believe the first copy, or the first edition, he was still living up in Alaska, and I related very much to that because I had lived in Alaska in the early 70s for a few years.
Interesting. I haven't gotten to that part, but in what God's talking about, God's explaining why God created the universe. And basically, it's, you know, in the explanation of it, it was simply so that God could witness His own magnificence.
Mm-hmm.
So God was curious just how great He was, and he wanted to experience how great he was, so he exploded into infinite pieces. And each piece is self-aware and looking at itself, but the way it's described is God had no way of knowing how great he was until he basically turned his back on himself and exploded, and turned back and observed how great he was. So every human being really is, according to this book, a piece of God. So that feeling inside of you that there's something special about you, yes, it's that you're God. Everyone is. But it's an interesting perspective, and it comes down to the idea of, so what's the point? So the point is to experience whatever droplet you are, to ride that water slide down and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I think that's a very practical way to explain things, but I don't see it as being necessarily grounded in depths of reality. I think that's very surface. Because if we have the understanding of God as that which is perfect and infinite, then there would be no questioning about, who am I, what am I, and what are my potentials. I think if we go back and look at God as the first cause and recognize that within that first cause there was a desire to experience and express love, I think you're getting closer to the true nature of God. I think that everything was created as an act of love. And I think that we are all the individualized creations or expressions of God. I think that at some point, those of us who wanted to engage in the idea of separation created this physical reality. So I don't think that it is God's source that created this. I think that because there's
God's kids, one of God's kids created this.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like running away from home for a couple of days. Going and back in the 50s, there was a story, a movie called The Boy with Green Hair, a very deep, profound movie that was presented very simplistically about differences and our desire to experience differences and how we have to get beyond seeing each other as being simply different. So at the core of all this, it's our commonalities that will bring us back together. As long as we are in defense of our differences, I think that we're holding on to an illusion that is self-deprecating and ultimately very self-destructive. So it's interesting because philosophically you can ponder these things for years, which apparently I've been doing, and you discover that you get less and less able to relate to a concrete reality, a concrete vision of what God is. God is this, God is that, blah, blah, blah. The more you go deeply into the mystical experience, the more you recognize the abstract and quantum reality nature of the divine. So ultimately you arrive at a plateau where you simply can't communicate these deeper, more profound experiences because there are no points of reference. You can't share things with people simply because we don't have the language to do that with. So then that takes stage.
There always.
Pardon me?
Well, at the end of the day, the conversation with God is private and inside of everyone. Yes.
Right.
I agree. But what's interesting about what you're saying was that according to God, the reason why God claims He created the reality, because there was no point of reference until He did.
Yeah, but see, again, that's the whole thing. When you return to spirit, when you return and actually step into those little snippets, and I think that it's on rare occasions when we slip out of time and slip into, communion or atonement with God. But when you arrive at that space, you have that realization that there is no need for um, for the linear um, identity and for the linear expression, because in truth, that experience of totality is so profound and so deep that it causes us to step even further away from that whole ego identity of God. You know, God doesn't have an ego because God doesn't need one, because God is totality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we as expressions of God in our divine state don't have egos either, because we are that which is perfect. So it's only in this realm of darkness. You know, now if you go out and look at space, that's where we're currently living. Is it's all dark except for a few stars here and there, and the sun at the center of the solar system. But when you actually have that experience that Ernest Holmes described as cosmic consciousness, you know, and Mary Baker Eddy, Siddhartha, Jesus, all of them had the same experience. It is the totality of light. There is no darkness anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's an astonishing shift of perception. So for us to try and comprehend God as we are in this mortal state, because again, God is immortal, and we in truth are immortal, we're trying to put the infinite into a finite form. And I think that's where a lot of religions and a lot of spiritual leaders get lost.
Well, I'm trying to manage my damn finite life.
Well, see, a lot of
It's
people
everywhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of people have, you know, again, this goes, it loops back into the beginning of our conversation. You're trying to live passionately, and that puts you on the roller coaster. Some of your passions are going to take you to great heights, and other passions are going to cause you to plunge to great depths. And you know, how long do you want to be on the roller coaster until you finally get to that point where you say, okay, I've had enough. I just want to be in a state of peace and joy and a sense of fulfillment and a sense of reward. And I think we can step out of that fight or flight syndrome that we all get trapped in by just letting go. I think that's, you know, letting go to the true self is really the way that we open the door and find our escape route.
Well, I think you're right. At this point, just letting go of everything will be everyone's best bet.
Mm-hmm.
Just letting go, and I don't mean giving up, but I just mean being okay with no matter what happens.
Right. Being detached and getting to that place where we observe, but we don't get victimized by conditions that we've either created or co-created with those around us.
But I also think, I'm just going to come back to my point, which is that people, human beings, right now with Saturn in Scorpio and the Sun in Scorpio, a lot of us, you have to pull yourself out of an old emotional rut, and you have to get off your ass, and you have to do it. And it's an emotional rut. Listen, merrily, life is but a dream. We get in these ruts where it's like, okay, now I'm going to fight with my wife, and now she's going to slam doors, and now this is going to happen, and that kind of, it is time to get out. That's where we either, or just, like you said, observe and let it, and watch it go by instead of getting on it.
Yeah, it's a freight train, and so if you stand on the tracks, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get nailed by that sucker. Mm-hmm. You know, so really the trick is to step into that next level of awareness where you recognize that I really didn't like it the last time it happened, so maybe there's something I can do to alter the possibility of that happening again.
Mm.
One thing I was going to interject with is that I think in my earlier years I found that people were so concerned about their bodies, what shapes they were in, what they were wearing, you know, who was thinking about them, and their egos were so into themselves that, I'm sorry, I've got a lawnmower going behind me, that now when we're trying to get off this freight train and go back, we have to realize, like the last show, is that our bodies are here only for so long, and whether we're here in body or in spirit, we're still here, and just don't worry about that minor shit anymore. Just go on with it, and you'll be a lot better emotionally.
I totally agree, but I think to put out the description of where the internal battle is that in that moment when the little thing is bugging you, there is a fear that you will never ever get the fuck out of this situation. That it will never stop. That if you don't, you know what I mean? Like, that's the conversation you're having inside yourself. You want to let it go and just let it go. I'm just going to, all right, the dog just shit on the rock. I'm just going to let it go. But there's that voice that goes, will it ever stop? So I think, go ahead, Master One. You're shaking your head.
Yeah, I think that with the endurance factor, we again get so trapped in time that we don't have a clear sense of who we are and how all of this stuff is fleeting, and yet who we are at the core of our being, that silent self within. That's what we ultimately will all revert back to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's difficult to that's the whole journey. I think that's one of the biggest journeys of life is it's fun to get carried up. I mean, as far as passion is concerned, I didn't come here to sit here in a meditative state and watch everyone the whole time, Master One. I want some ice cream.
Well, no, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying that you should be aware of what you're doing when you're in the midst of it. And if you're trying to sustain the experience,
yes,
then you're missing the point.
Absolutely. And yeah, you gotta. To me, it's like a water slide. You gotta climb all the way to the top after you're already in a bathing suit and probably wet and cold. So like, there's a big lead up, and then when you get to that slide, enjoy it because it's gonna end.
It absolutely is, and you go to care facilities where you've got people getting ready to transition out, getting ready to move, across that region that we all ultimately end up transitioning across, and watching them go through this torturous cycle of clinging to the body. And going down hard and dirty with this kind of cancer and that kind of, thing. And I mean, it really gets incredibly ugly. And I think that that's the element that I observe that causes me, to really question that whole idea of being passionately involved in life. Because at some point you're going to have to disengage. And when you do disengage, hopefully it won't be one of those, hugely dark experiences where you're dragging the whole family into this, 200-year or 200-day-long journey while you're literally rotting from cancer or whatever it is that you're doing.
Well, that's really bleak.
Well, but that's, as you get to the end of your years, you start to observe these things, and then you realize, this is all that's been going on around me. How stupid was I? I never really stopped and connected the dots.
Yeah, and I think a lot of humankind is kind of tied into the rituals of dying, and some people just kind of like get tied in those rituals and follow those particular stories, but those just, you didn't have to follow those stories.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's funny, but yeah, when people are more tied to the land, I think that's where this has screwed us up, is the city life. Because, tied to the land, I don't think, as people got the elderly and whatnot, it's like on farms and cultures around the land, people didn't start, you don't think of it as decay. It never
you see it as that eternal return to, to the dormancy or to the source element, and that's where the whole journey begins and ends, is in process of atonement or at-one-ment, where we rejoin the universe and then perhaps come back again for another cosmic day.
Well, it looks like I think we're all going to go very much inward, and with Saturn moving into Sagittarius come Christmas Eve, I think everyone is going to start to go down some sort of inward journey or adventure. You could say that everyone is about to get a hobby.
Well,
go ahead.
That would be nice. You know, the thing I love about Sagittarius is it has two components. Like all three of the fire signs, there is a huge amount of innocence, and I find that with all three fire signs.
They're so cute, those Sages. They are
Yes.
very innocent. You just want to pinch their cheeks.
And the other element is the desire to go beyond the horizon.
Yes.
And I think Sagittarius is, you know, really in a lot of ways the Fool card in the tarot deck, simply because the Fool is, you know, initiating the journey and wants to go travel the world and have all these experiences that teach him the meaning of life, or her. So having Saturn show up in Sagittarius, to me, gives me the image of, or the concept of, the Sages becoming our teachers for a 2.5-year passage. So if you really want to know where the journey is leading the collective, pay attention to Sagittarius people, and also, you know, occasionally look at where Sagittarius is located in your own personal chart, because that will be very, very revealing for you.
Mm-hmm. Sagittarius, to me, I'm starting to have a different perspective on it, especially as I'm having a different perspective of God. It feels like to me that we've come to experience ourself. That's it. We've come to experience ourself in the physical. And what Sagittarius is an unlimited number of possibilities to me. This is absolute unlimited, which is where the galactic center is in Sagittarius, and there are unlimited possibilities of what you can manifest, unlimited stories, unlimited potential. And so with Saturn and Sagittarius, I agree. All the Sages will come forward, all the teachers will come forward, and they will teach. And I was looking at the American Revolution and what this period is, the American Revolution, and this was the period where we basically sat around bitching about the British for 3 years in bars.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously.
Or tea houses, or coffee houses, yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, pubs actually.
Mm-hmm.
The seeds of the American Revolution, the seeds of democracy, were born actually in pubs.
Actually in coffee houses, interestingly enough.
We were drinking coffee or beer?
No, they were drinking coffee, because if you go back and look at the era, the English were in control of the tea. And the colonists, the larger bulk of the colonists, had arrived from the British Isles. So they were addicted to their tea. Well, when Britain cut off the tea supply, there was this immediate struggle to find an alternative, to find a different beverage, and the coffee showed up on the radar, and all of a sudden, literally, America invented coffee houses instead of tea houses.
I got you.
Yeah, and
Starbucks
then everybody
was born.
Instead of getting suppressed on alcohol, everybody would get amped up on coffee, on caffeine, and that's really the core of the revolution, according to what Marty the Squirrel told me about, you know, that era.
It was coffee, not beer.
Right.
Well, I know John Quincy Adams and most of those were liquored up events.
Oh yeah. They definitely weren't holding back from indulgence, but I think that one of the theories that I have encountered, a couple of people I know, one of them was at the Harvard Law School, was very astute and a very keen observer, and he noticed that the Declaration of Independence, all of the signatures, there was a similarity there, and he called in a couple of handwriting analysts, and they did a very deep study, a lengthy study, and came to the conclusion that the Declaration of Independence, because all of these men were spread out all over the area and couldn't get together, on that one specific day to sign the document. So it is theorized that, in fact, Benjamin Franklin forged all of the signatures on the Declaration of Independence, and it was done during the day, and it kind of pushed the stone over the edge and started the domino effect that ended up creating America.
It's a forgery.
They may have been on the same page with the document, but actually being physically present and having signed it is somewhat controversial, which I thought was kind of fun.
Huh, very interesting.
But see, again, that loops back into the idea that all these illusions that we hold so dearly are in fact illusions, and some of them you can find the fractures in them very, very easily, and others you have to dig around until you come to the realization that, oh, this is not my truth. I may have embraced it for 50 years and beat myself silly trying to support it, but ultimately you have to, again, get to that passage that we're talking about where you are able to release that attachment that you have to something you believe to be dear.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's well, as I went to college in America and saw all the false truths, including Paul Revere was not the guy that told us the British were coming. He felt he was drunk and didn't make the journey. It was some Jewish guy whose sound has a very long ski kind of name and doesn't rhyme well in poetry. There's so much that we really are just completely wrong about. And when 9/11 has rolled around, and now that it's been a few years past, I'm looking at kids reading stuff in textbooks that I know is all bullshit, and I'm watching bullshit go down the conveyor belt to the next set of generations, the next Paul Revere bullshit being created. But that's the whole point of Sagittarius. It's all created. It's all made up. Everything in life, absolutely. It comes down to what you want to subscribe to.
Mm-hmm. A movie that I just dug out and watched again. Have you ever seen Mr. Nobody with Jared Leto?
Mm-mm.
It's an amazingly profound movie. It was co-created between an alliance, I think, of French, English, and American cinema groups collaborating to create this movie. And it's about Mr. Nobody, a man who is 119 years old and the last mortal on the planet. And the movie is basically him having a reverie, talking to a reporter about his life. And he's at a very lucid place where he sees that he doesn't have one life, he has multiple lives. And that it's all contingent on a decision that he made at an early point in his life when his parents broke up. Do I go and stay with my mother, or do I go and stay with my father? And that, created a whole series of different life experiences. And ultimately, at the end of the movie, the underlying statement or the underlying idea that comes across is that the only way to win the game is not to play.
Aha!
As soon as you make a decision, you've eliminated the possibilities, and you've created a destiny. So I would say for the full moon, this would be another good exercise for people. If you can get your hands on the movie, give it a spin, because that's a very Scorpio, full moon in Taurus kind of movie. It does have a lot of depth to it.
That has a lot of rings to it, and I was going to say I think it's very attuned to the time in the sense that I do think that people are taking the red pill or the blue pill here in the next couple of weeks, and I do think it's a very private, something very, very private that means only something to you, but represents a new trend. But I agree with you. At the end of the day, you're going to end up right where you started. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Well, it's
realizing.
like, Alice finally wakes up and realizes that Wonderland was all happening inside her head.
Yeah. But it really comes down to it comes down to what your soul wishes to experience. That's what
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to. What your soul wishes to experience, and that's the honesty and being honest with yourself about what you want to experience. So it's gonna be interesting, and I think we're all up for an interesting experience. The last time Saturn was the Sag, we talked about this last week, was kind of the birth of The Secret and this whole modern vision board kind of thing. So I think you're right. I think the new sages are going to step forward, and there's a new level of teaching coming,
It is, yeah. It's right on the threshold. So
and hopefully some good movies and some good storytelling.
I think that we're going to definitely see an era of artistic expression that will really start getting crystallized, because Saturn is that planet that does crystallize. So a lot of the visionary Sagittarians, their visions are going to become crystallized, and they'll be able to share them, and that's going to affect all different levels of the arts. So I think we'll actually have a good friend who is a young gentleman. I think Noah, I think, is maybe 24 now, and he used that the oh, how do they call it? Anyway, he's basically sent out a message to all of his friends and family and yada yada yada, and said, I'm seeking funding for printing my first book of poetry.
Ah.
And so he had a goal of 1,800, and I think he came up with about 2,600 to fund his first book of poetry. And I'm looking forward to receiving a copy of that, because I, tossed some money in the pot. And he's a Sagittarius, and I'm seeing a lot of Sagittarius now start to come online with taking things that they've been playing with and ruminating about for the last 5 years, and actually turning them into something solid.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%, which will be very interesting and fun.
Yes.
Sagittarius are fun. I always say, if I were to be, this is a question for you to wrap up. If you're going to be stuck on a desert island, what sign would you want to be stuck with, Master OneFeather?
Well, it wouldn't be Sagittarius, because we Pisces end up being edgy around both Geminis and Sagittarius with that square going. And Virgos, after a while, we just drag them to the ocean and drown their ass. So
I think every sign would agree with that.
yeah. So ultimately, the ones that I enjoy the most, I think, and it's been a sustained journey, has been all my Leo people. I really enjoy the presence of Leo people in my life.
Leos are quite wonderful if they are alone with you.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they have an audience, they're high maintenance, I find. So yes, the desert island would work with a Leo. They're quite fabulous. But I think I would choose a Sag because it'd be more fun and there'd be less whining.
Yeah. Well, see, that's that makes sense for you, because again, that's an inconjunct. If you look at your chart, you being a Taurus, Sag is an inconjunct, and me being a Pisces, Leo is an inconjunct, and that makes total sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, well, that's a good wrap up. Mary, how about you? What sign would you choose, darling?
I don't know. I tend toward not Aquariuses, and I know the signs I wouldn't want to be with, but I think Leo. I think Leo would be.
Well, Leo is love, and the truth of the matter is, I think astrologically, everybody is a Leo. But 11 signs added yet another flavor to that mix. But we are all Leo. We are all love. We are all Leo. Leo's just living it without any skin. Yeah. Yeah,
and actually, if you guys were, the people who are watching this, if they were in the house here, I've got a Italian meat sauce that's on the stove that's coming into its prime right now. And the house is filled with the most incredible amount of love that you can imagine. So I'm going to be building a lasagna tomorrow.
Oh, that's amazing. I think aromatherapy does so well, especially this time of year. I love a pot roast or something cooking in the house all day. I wish community. That's the one thing I miss about the old days when we lived in little villages together, is everyone smelled each other's cooking all day.
Well, and you know, you had extended families. You would have parents, grandparents, children, and sometimes great-grandchildren all living under the same roof. And I think that creates a whole different understanding of what life is, too.
It really does. It really does. All right, Master OneFeather. Well, this is a good wrap-up point. We have a full moon tonight. Anything you want to wish to our viewers before we say au revoir?
I think that you know, the big thing is to go out and howl.
Yes.
The werewolves of London. You'll spot them. Their hair is going to be perfect.
Yeah, there's some Leo in them, Werewolves of London. Yeah.
That's right.
It's gonna be a fun. Yeah, it should be a fun. And the full moon in Taurus is always indulgent and very heavy. So it's heavy cream sauces and heavy sleep.
Yes.
Yeah, but enjoy, my friends, and you'll see what it's like to be me for 24 hours. We'll see you guys in 7 days with more. If you'd like information on Master OneFeather's show, it's right here in the paragraph of this video description with a link. And, of course, you can see my show every day, Namaste Today, Monday through Friday. Until next week, we'll see you guys later. Live, love, be.
Take care.